Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is Monica Patterson with Sutherland Global Services, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our webinar on data-driven finance for achieving excellence in order-to-cash operations. Over the next hour, you'll hear from industry experts Veena Gundavelli and John Sunkheimer on this topic. And I'd quickly like to introduce both of our speakers today and thank them for their time. First of all, Veena Gundavelli, who is the CEO of Emagia Corporation. She has extensive experience in enterprise software and business intelligence and data analytics areas in particular. And John Sunkheimer, who is the F&A Global Technology Leader for Sutherland Global Services, who has extensive experience both in management consulting and corporate finance, having spent time on both sides of the desk, the CFO and the consultant. So I'll go ahead now and turn it over to our guest speakers, and please feel free to save any questions you have for the end and ask those at the end of our event today. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica, for the nice introductions. Thank you, John, for joining us today. Hello, everyone. This is Veena Gundavelli from Emagia, and looking forward to sharing an exciting 1 hour with you on data-driven finance, both from John and myself. For those of you who have joined Emagia webinars for the first time, a little bit about Emagia. We are a software company focused primarily around delivering financial operations solutions, especially in the order-to-cash management area. Our solutions have been deployed at several global finance departments and shared service centers over the last 1 decade. And again, our mission is to help our customers maximize their financial performance by driving efficiency and intelligence in finance operations. Automate, optimize your AR, AP, and working capital process, and that's what we help our customers for. So today's session is primarily, again, focused around order-to-cash side of the business. And we have solutions in the order-to-cash side of the business to take care of both the automation aspects of it as well as the analytics and insights portion of it. Again, those of you who are interested, we can talk about these solutions later on. For the purposes of today's discussion, we'll focus primarily on our webinar topic, which is, again, data-driven transformation for O2C. With this, I welcome John Sunkheimer, who's the finance and accounting transformation expert and who has a lot of knowledge around transforming finance processes. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Veena. I appreciate the introduction. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and perhaps good evening. Thank you for joining our webinar. We all receive a lot of webinar invitations these days, so I hope that Veena and I can make this a productive time for you today. Traditionally, the focus when talking about order-to-cash matters, it's been on the tactical side of things, whether it's DSO or collections or so forth. But now that looking at things from a digital perspective in a much more of a data-driven world, the question is, how can we better exploit the data? Whether it's deploying analytics, or how can I think about transforming my order-to-cash operations, or maybe what are some of the benefits that can be realized, and what are the impact of automation and robotics having on order-to-cash. Ultimately, all of these activities are aligned around improving shareholder value, and that's what I want to spend some time talking about today. Just a few words about Sutherland. We are a a company of over 38,000 employees, providing services in over 30 countries globally. We have about 5,000 employees in our finance and accounting practice, located in 10 countries, with supporting 20 different languages and about 70 clients. And you can see some of the logos on the slide there. Servicing clients in a number of verticals, including technology, transportation and logistics, retail, and healthcare. You know, I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about, you know, some of the history of finance transformation. You know, finance transformation is not new. In fact, you know, Cotter wrote his paper in the Harvard Business Journal on why finance transformation fails about 22 years ago. So it's been around a while now. There's nothing new. There's no secret to finance transformation per se. But I think what we're really talking about now in today's environment is really more around finance transformation 2.0, because technology is really changing the game. And so when you think about, you know, the imperative to think about, you know, transforming your business from a finance perspective, look at it in the context of a couple of these quotes here and a couple of these data points. So that, you know, digital is the main reason that over half of the companies in the Fortune 500 have disappeared since the year 2000. You know, 1.5 billion smartphones shipped in 2016. I mean, that's an amazing statistic. And then the last one, you know, digital technologies and approaches aren't just for tech, media, and retailers anymore. They're infusing all aspects of the business world. So I think I think that the answer to the question of when do I need to think about transforming, I think the answer is yesterday. The advancements in technology are fundamentally, I mean, think about it, changing how companies compete, how they interact with their customers, how they leverage technology, how they're opening up completely new avenues for data analytics, and rethinking, you know, the role of finance. So there are now 6.5 billion smartphones in the world. I think there are more smartphones in the world now than there are people. But in essence, think about the fact that only a couple of years ago, the notion of bringing your device to work, you know, the BYOD concept, was initially a very novel concept. CIOs didn't want you to bring it to work in the beginning. Then it was bringing your technology to work, because what you had at home was typically better. You typically had better technology at home than you had at work. And now with over 6 billion people with mobile access, the expectation is that you can take your work with you wherever you go with exactly the tools and the data and the visualization that you need to be able to get your job done. So clearly a changing dynamic. Now, unfortunately, the reality is that not everybody necessarily understands the imperative and doesn't understand the urgency of being able to continue on the transformation journey. So, as you can see on the cartoon here, this plays out in reality, I think, all too often these days. Every company's story is different, but I think that playing it safe is likely not the best option. Think about Blockbuster, Circuit City, Kodak, Sears, and Yahoo. I think all these companies, you know, were very high in the Fortune 500 at one point in time, and now they either don't exist or they're being sold off in chunks. So just something to keep in mind. So as we move forward, though, and think about it more from a future perspective of transformation, and we look at it in the context of the impact that digital is really having on the finance organization. So data is really the new currency, and it's, you know, leveraging analytics is much more focused on you know, leveraging the massive amounts of unstructured data that exist within a finance organization, within a company, and turning that into knowledge creation with analytical tools, focusing much more on business-driven outcomes as opposed to just trying to cut costs. And then think about it in the context of what does that mean from a business perspective in terms of the kind of talent that you need, what kind of organizational structure is appropriate for a new digital company. And then finally, thinking about it in the context of the fact that more and more activities can be automated, moving up the spectrum from simple to complex. What that means is that your team can focus on the more complex transactions and letting automation take care of the more routine and less complex transactions. That fundamentally changes how we think about transformation. So what we're really talking about here is digital disruption in the order-to-cash space. So from an automation perspective, we're seeing robots perform much more complex tasks than they have before, where you're looking at they're able to look at historical patterns across multiple complex data sets, and literally combining together unstructured text, speech recognition, and video to be able to do things that frankly they've never been able to do before. So that automation helps reduce errors, it helps reduce the time to completion, and obviously a fallout of that is going to be to reduce costs, but also at the same time increase customer satisfaction. In the order-to-cash process, when you think about from the process flow perspective, I know that based upon some recent experience I've had in talking to companies in the space, that they're nearing an 80% rate of the untouched perfect order. In other words, an order without any manual intervention. And at some point in time, a 90% untouched perfect order, it's not an unreasonable target. I mean, that becomes a game changer in terms of thinking about order processing in the order-to-cash space. So I think the technology there is really becoming very robust, and it's beginning to change how we even think about doing transformation. So from a predictive perspective, the example that I'd like to cite, because predictive can be pretty broad when people talk about predictive analytics, and Dina's going to talk quite a bit more about this in the other part of the presentation from the Emagia perspective and what they can do. But if Company A has $25,000 that's past due 4 days, and Company B is $15,000 due, but it's not going to be due for 3 days, which one should I be calling? In the old model, of course, you're going to call Company A because they're $25,000 past due for 4 days. And but in reality, from a predictive perspective, in the new model, what you're going to be doing is calling Company B first, because you know that Company A always pays you. Now, they pay you late by 4 days, but that could have something to do with their weekly or biweekly check cutting cycle and payment processing cycle, as opposed to anything else that might be a risk. So in reality, Company B is going to be your bigger risk, and that's what you want to be able to focus on going forward. So now the final two categories here, connected and global, I think if you think about the fact that analytics, and especially order-to-cash analytics, can help you link together marketing to finance to operations, to linking together predicting orders and stocking inventory and analyzing results. That's a way of thinking about analytics in a way that really hasn't been thought of in the past. And finally, I think it goes without saying that anytime you can link together your businesses globally, that adds to your ability to scale even more quickly. So from a connected order-to-cash model, I think that Vina will cover on this a little bit more in detail in her section of the presentation, but I think it goes without saying that it's not just about cost reduction anymore. There are so many ways to be able to improve customer service and customer satisfaction and get products to market, get our customer service more quickly, where the connected order-to-cash model really begins to pay out. Just a few minutes on the transformation approach. You know, the approach that we like to focus on is to really think long and hard on the front end in terms of defining the strategy and thinking about the organizational structure, because as I mentioned earlier, in the finance transformation 2.0 model, the roles and the skills are fundamentally changing. So thinking about how you want to organize your business and how you want to organize your finance organization to maybe have those people closer to your customer than they've been in the past. I think those are things that you need to think about as you're working through this. Then that also then lines up with thinking about how you reevaluate centralizing into service centers and what you might think about in terms of doing it from an outsourced perspective. But the bottom line is thinking about how can you really connect end-to-end in order to cash to get your customer serviced and get paid quickly, and then have your finance organization embedded in that process from beginning to end. So the bottom line then is thinking about how the finance organization can help be more predictive than reactive, leveraging automation, leveraging digital and data, and using the amounts of data that are available in a data-driven model to really think much more about end-to-end process perspectives and really and then focusing on enabling a finance organization that can predict rather than just react to circumstances. Part and parcel to this, though, then is when you think about diving deeper into the transformation model, it's really around creating an iterative approach that focuses on really a front end of a lot of discovery and design work. A lot of that is data-driven, with a heavy emphasis on an iterative approach to managing your transformation culture. And the benefits that you end up deriving from analytics in order to cash, and obviously Vina will cover on this, but from my perspective, it really covers not only just your working capital and revenue, but it injects a level of controls into the model that previous models really haven't provided, because you have much more real-time monitoring of your key controls. Your predictive indicators really help to prevent failures, and you're really putting in implicitly an improved risk mitigation model to help you reduce your overall business risk. So I think that those are some of the benefits that maybe you didn't think about going into it, but that you get as an outcome just based upon the newer approaches to doing transformation and the newer technologies that are available to think about. So as we think about then on this next page, embedding the analytics into the operations, what I wanted to show you briefly is where we've been at Sutherland and where you can go. This particular client happens to have been in the insurance business. So the analytics really provide the visibility to understanding payment behavior and understanding cancellations and late payments and DSO at a detailed level. And then that visibility provides you with insight to be predictive, to use modeling for how to manage late payments, for how to deal with policy cancellations and to mitigate those cancellations. And the impact, obviously, is reducing cancellations, recovering late payments, and improving DSO. So just a little example of what we've specifically seen in one client where we employed this approach. With that, I will then turn it back over to Veena. And Veena, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, John. That was a good introduction to some of the new next generation technologies that are impacting order-to-cash process. My portion of the presentation today will cover a specific methodology that you can use. Again, this is a data-driven methodology, data-driven transformation methodology that you can use to take your order-to-cash process from current state to a future-ready, digital and data-driven stage. My presentation, again, will focus primarily on this specific methodology. Data-driven, what do we mean by data-driven? Data-driven means that the decisions that we make or the activity that we do is compelled by data rather than by intuition or personal experience. This is especially important in the finance organization. Today, most finance organizations primarily run their order-to-cash operations with experience and intuition dealing with customers. And what we're talking about here is, leveraging the data that you have in your order-to-cash process to be able to drive your decisions on how to manage your customers as well as manage your operations internally. Again, data-driven methodologies have been widely used in various parts of the organizations by many companies. And leading companies that adopt data-driven methodologies in managing their supply chain, for example, managing their sales and marketing operations, for example, or in general the business performance. According to McKinsey and other reports, these leaders outperform their competitions significantly. Again, it's not by, one-fold, two-folds, sometimes, the pace which it sets is significantly faster and ahead of the peers. And this is where, we are recommending that order-to-cash departments start looking closer into these kind of methodologies and see how they can adopt similar kind of data-driven strategies into their operations. So what kind of components, go into the data-driven methodology? And as John shared, digital technologies, data management, analytics, automation with the robots, as well as, guided, human activities. These are all the different elements that go into data-driven management. It's the nexus of these forces that create this combined effect and a game-changing effect for the organization. So, again, Deloitte, recently covered what does the role of a CFO look like in 2020. And, very clearly, it shows that there's a lot of usage of new technologies that will go as part of, finance organizations, that can drive better efficiencies and better insights. So the usage of cloud, usage of, data analytics, predictive, cognitive analytics, as well as, the social media, mobile, these kind of technologies will become commonplace in the finance organizations. So if you are making investments in finance transformation, this is the time for you to look at new generation technologies and looking at, how you can make your organizations, future ready. So looks like the slide went back to the previous one. I'm going to just move this over back to me. Okay. Gonna skip a couple of slides here. Okay. So looking at the order to cash complexity, again, today in most organizations, order to cash process is fairly complex. There are multiple different subcomponents or sub-processes that are managed by different set of people, for example, disparate groups, disconnected processes, many people or, many groups around the world managing, various portions of the accounts receivable portfolio. All of that leads to the complexity of the order to cash cycle. How do you get visibility across, everything that's going on around the world and manage that particular process? So most order to cash transformation projects start with the need for having improved reporting, improved cash flow forecasting, for example, need for reducing days sales outstanding, as well as identifying credit risk and improving transaction efficiency. So these are the top four. Excuse me. Top four goals for order to cash transformation. So for simplicity purposes, we have arrived at 4 C's. One is cost, control, compliance, and cash flow. So let's look at how modern technologies, can address all of these 4 core pillars. In today's discussion in data-driven, we'll focus on data management, analytics, and digital automation. So the first, place where you start data-driven is, getting control on your data. Eliminate the data silos. That's the first step. So this starts with, placing data management in the heart of your order to cash transformation. Bring all of your customer data, your operational data from multiple data sources. Bring that into a central repository. Get a single view of truth. This is the most important aspect. So before you do any process, process transformation, even to get visibility of where you should begin the transformation and how, how you need to go from current state to future state, it's really important to understand all of the data at one place and have the visibility of that particular data. And from there, you can deploy analytics in the step 2 and gain a lot more insight into the analytics and understand how, you can make better decisions. For example, order to cash data gives great insights into understanding customer payment behavior, understanding DSO, understanding, collection efficiency index, as well as, several other key performance indices that are used in the order to cash management. And using that information, again, you can set your goals for transformation. Once you have those goals, that's where, you can set the third step, which is taking each of these sub-process, digitize, and automate. And again, we recommend that you start out with places where there is highest impact. In some organizations, the highest impact, could be in the credit management process, where onboarding of a customer, is taking a lot more longer, for example. Or in other companies, cash applications, could be an area of high impact. Maybe there are a lot of staff, primarily, doing data entry and posting the data into the cash application system. So again, identify, areas that need the highest impact and digitize and automate. So let's look at each of these 3 steps and understand what does it mean at each step, and how do we manage this. So in step 1, again, some of the leading new generation technologies are enabling a lot of these changes. For example, there are databases, for example, the big data, Hadoop is an open source database. this is a low-cost storage database. It is, zero license cost, freely available, and more and more, companies are looking at how can I just, put my data into these kind of open source and low-cost systems instead of, putting it in very costly ERP systems or in legacy systems. How can I move out of that? So this is, where, companies like ours, come into the picture where, we can help, again, move all of these different data into a single repository. What is the advantage for you with the single repository? One, you can see the information, you can see the consolidated reporting across all of your enterprise. You can have customer master governance, for example, making sure that your customers and the customer accounts are organized and you have a proper, governance and control on the shipping address, billing address, and other sort of information. So, when you do customer segmentation, then you have the right information with you, for example. So this is about how you bring the data together. Again, as I've mentioned, there are companies, that are, actively using modern data technologies. There are companies that use traditional data warehouses and have, a very expensive model of, putting the data together. But if you're having a transformation project started out, right now, it's important to see what are some of the upcoming new technologies that are lower cost as well as, give you a lot more flexibility. Some of the advantages of these systems include putting both transactional data, such as your invoices, credit memos, debit memos, etc., as well as all the related documents also in the same system. So in one data store, you will now be able to have not only the information on the transactions, but also all of the supporting documents, such as your bank statements, your invoice images, your letters, your credit memos, and all of that. So just imagine, having, a system where, like a Google search, you will be able to, simply go search for a particular customer and get all related transactions and all related documents at one place. That gives a lot of power, to order-to-cash departments where majority of the time is spent on administrative activities, trying to figure out, where the data is, where the document is, and trying to pull it all together. With this new generation systems, you will now be able to get all of that in one place and, will be able to make your departments a lot more efficient. Now, once you have the data in the centralized place, again, new generation technologies around analytics can give you a lot of insight into, what this data and documents contain. For example, you can, have dashboards giving you daily analysis around credit risk, AR aging, for example, disputes, how are our disputes, trending, are more number of disputes, coming in on a particular product line, for example, or our cash application. Our cash is coming in, but we are not able to apply as fast as we should be. All of those trends and information can be viewed, using visual analytics. Again, I think, with this new generation technologies, you will be able to have more of a self-service analytics, available for your, finance operational teams. One of the important aspects I would like to focus here is, in a traditional order-to-cash process management, usually companies go by, getting reports out of an ERP system. For example, you have an aging report, coming out of an ERP system, and most of the order-to-cash, team is organized around, hey, how do we, start collecting, after it is past due, and what kind of letters do we send, or what kind of calls do we need to make? Whereas, with analytics, as an example, you can take customer payment behavior. The analytics engine will be able to identify who is, a fast-paying customer, or who is who is paying late, and how often does that happen, and what is the probability of, this particular customer, delaying a payment on this particular invoice. All of that can be, calculated by analytics and handed it over to the order-to-cash team. And this is a simple example of one such analytics metrics that I'm talking about. Like that, you can have in the order management space, you can have several metrics that keep track of how the order management operations are going. Likewise, on the credit side, you can have several metrics that can keep track of the credit management side of the business. For example, credit utilization of a particular customer, or credit approval cycle, how long is it taking for a particular business unit. All of those aspects on the credit management side. Receivables management, again, you can have several metrics. Receivables turnover time, for example, past due aging, payment term analysis, DSO analysis. On the collection side, again, tracking how efficiently are you able to allocate the AR portfolio to your collectors. How big is your team, and what is how much of that is going through automated collections versus people actually calling the customers, and how efficient is that operation. You can have metrics around that. Deductions and disputes, you can have metrics around root cause analysis. Who are your top disputing customers? What are your top disputing reasons? And what are some of the factors that are, impacting, why a particular product line is, having more disputes? What factors are correlating to that? All of that information can be obtained, again, in deductions analysis. Likewise, in cash application, how can you can have automated systems that can provide you, matching, the matching metrics. How many of the remittances are actually matching, to your invoices. Again, these are some examples. You can, based on the your organization's priorities, you can set some of these metrics, or a lot of these metrics, and keep monitoring these metrics, with information on the daily dashboards. So let's look at, what do analytics bring to the table? Again, there are, there are about 3 different types of analytics. One is the descriptive analytics. Descriptive usually gives you information about what happened and why it happened. For example, if I look at a, aging analysis, I can, look at what happened on, the aging bucket, or a, particular past due trend. Is this happening because of a few customers, or is this happening because of a particular product line, or a business unit, or a region? So I can see the trend, as well as I can understand what factors have actually made that particular trend in a particular way. This will help me understand previous behavior, or past history, and help me correct my operations. So again, a lot of companies use descriptive analytics to make to understand what happened and make corrective actions. The next is predictive analytics. Now, this is where the power of new technology comes in. With the new technologies, predictive analytics, give you a forecast of what may happen, or what can potentially happen. So, for example, what potentially is your cash flow going to be this week? What potentially your cash flow is going to be next week? For a particular customer, is this customer going to pay this week or not? Or when is this customer going to pay? All of that, predictive information is what predictive analytics give. Again, it's a very powerful information, and this is where you can use this information, on identifying your, cash flow forecast, identifying risk. You can predict the DSO of your, company. You can predict the DSO of each of your individual product lines, and again, manage, some of these. So again, this is an area where, top companies, business leaders are investing in predictive analytics and driving their processes to, be more proactive rather than reactive. So again, a lot of power to predictive analytics. The next is prescriptive analytics. Prescriptive analytics, these are also called sometimes as optimization analytics. So these are, primarily, analytics that actually guide or navigate your teams. For example, if you want, your DSO to be a particular number, understanding what can, what factors affect that particular number, and the system to be able to automatically start giving you on a daily basis, what you should be doing, or which customers you should be contacting, or which business units, should fix some of the operation problems to be able to achieve that particular DSO. So this is where, again, a lot of, futuristic prescriptive and cognitive analytics, are, going to be one of the key drivers, for top performers. They are going to be game changers. Again, very similar to how, in a Google navigation map, if I want to go from one source to a destination, the map continuously stays with me and keeps guiding me how to get to my destination. And what we are seeing with this new generation technologies is the ability for the system to continuously guide your teams to reach the performance metric that you are, setting for them and for your organization. So with this, let's go into, how can you use, some of these technologies. Again, you can start using this for specific purposes. Some companies, want to use this for staffing allocation. We have, X number of people, let's say I have, few hundred, staff, operating in my order to cash department. How can I seek staff allocation and optimize that? You can use it for control purposes. Track your DSOs and, collection indexes and, use it for those purposes. Compliance, for example, cash flow we have already talked about, and customer, payment behavior, this is also something that we have already talked about. So again, you can use analytics in each of these areas, have a laser focus on how you can go from current state to the future state, and, continuously, monitor this in a very data-driven way. So once you have the data and the insight, what can you do on the process, right? So the third step we talk about is, how can you digitize and automate the process? Today, in most order-to-cash operations, a lot of administration as well as human activity goes on to gather information, to correlate information, to collate information, and communicate and share. So what we're talking about here is how can you have a process that you can digitize and automate 80% of it, and how can you have, primarily 20%, more of a high value add tasks as well as, exceptions, that can be touched, by, your staff, and that, they can attend to those activities and add, more value to the activities. So let's look at what are some of the areas. For example, on the credit side. On the credit side, if you transform from a paper-based credit application to, have a digital application where customer is able to fill the digital application, the system will automatically be able to, go find the references, get their references, take the digital signatures, will be able to find the reports in the from the credit bureaus, for example. System can, again, take that information, process that through credit scoring. If the score is a good score, then again, based on your, standard settings, you can recommend that, hey, in this particular customer, may need, let's say, credit approval of, 500,000. So the system can automatically, ensure that, that particular process have gone through in a very fast order. Or wherever it needs attention, it's a high-risk customer, we want the system to process that and get that in front of the credit manager or a, director or a, CFO or a, or whoever the authority is, to approve. You can again have the system take care of that. So again, what we're talking about is digitizing your repetitive activities and digitizing your, activities that may not need, significant attention, and making sure that the system is able to prompt for, high risk and high alert activities where your team can spend majority of their time, doing those activities. Similarly, on the receivable side, electronic invoice presentment, electronic statement presentment, to be able to, send, these copies, to the customers in an automated way. It provides tremendous efficiencies around, customer financial services. Likewise, cash flow forecasting, if you're able to get all of this in an automated manner. Most companies today spend a lot of time gathering reports from multiple different business units and, pulling together, the forecast. All that, can be automated. Again, various different aspects can be automated on the portfolio reporting. On the collection side, very similarly, automated or digital activities, can happen where most repetitive, follow-up with the customers can be done by the system, and your staff can primarily focus on high-risk customers as well as, high alert situations. Likewise, with deductions and dispute management, if there is a short pay, for example, a customer, has sent a check, but it's, short by, let's say, $1,000. The system, should be able to automate and, create a process where this short pay should be able to, again, go through a process and, primarily alert whether it is a customer and ask them for, what is the information and, why a particular, short pay or, why there is a dispute on this $1,000. Again, all of those, activities can be automated through software robots. Again, we are talking about digital processes, doing some of these repetitive activities and having your team focused on, high performance areas. Cash application is also a very good area where you can have a lot of cost savings by digitizing the processes, as well as you can have tremendous efficiencies on your cash application by digitizing the process. Today, in most companies, you have a large cash application staff, keying in entries, from bank statements into an ERP system or multiple legacy systems. All of that process, is typically time-consuming and holds your cash, to be able to, from being used for working capital. An automated digital system should be able to take all of the information from the bank accounts, from the log boxes, from your, email, all the remittance advisors and all of that information, and should be able to process that and primarily alert your cash application team only if there are mismatches or only if, there are, 20% of the transactions that it is unable to match and unable to identify. Again, tremendous efficiencies can come with this, digitization and automation of the process. In a nutshell, across the entire credit, receivables, collections, deductions, and cash applications, most of the repetitive activities, 80% of your repetitive activities can be automated And again, digitization and automation of these processes can bring you tremendous efficiencies. It can also help your team to become more strategic, value add, rather than spending their time in very repetitive activities. Now, again, I have a slide in each of these areas, which I've already spoke quite a bit on the previous slide. So I'll not spend a whole lot of time on each of these, but this is for your quick review. Again, on the receivables portfolio side, you can do aging, risk analysis, cash efficiency, etc. And a lot of automated emailing, faxing, electronic invoice presentment, payment, all of that can be automated again, with your automation of the receivables system. Credit process, we've talked about. Digital signatures, online credit application, automating your scoring, decisions, approval process, as well as credit renewals with your existing customers. A lot of that can be automated, and can help you maximize the efficiency on your credit management process. This again is very helpful, especially if you're on a high growth strategy. When your sales and customer service teams are looking at processing the the new customer onboarding, as well as processing the orders in fast order. Again, the credit to cash department should be able to respond to those needs in a fast order. So this is where automation and digitization can help a lot. Collection process, again, we've talked about how you can automate 80% of the repetitive correspondence to your customers. You can do collections optimization. You can have a personalized collection treatment to each of your customers. So that way you can, make sure that your customers, are able to, get the attention that they need. At the same time, you're able to manage all of that in a way that it is not a very high cost, as well as, not a, a very intense activity, from your staff. The digital robots, as well as the automated processes, can augment the activities and can help your collectors to be a lot more efficient. On the dispute resolution, we've talked about how you can have automated dispute resolution. Audit trails with this, again, is a very important component, and especially we have found that companies who use automated dispute resolution have better compliance, and again, they are able to resolve the disputes in a faster order. They are able to reduce the bad debts, in a significant way. So again, a lot of power of automation to the dispute process. Customer self-service. So this is an area where, again, when you are having invoices and statements, posted on a customer self-service portal, your customers, especially your customers who have repetitive business with or a recurring business, with your organization, can get a lot of information without having to call an individual within your company. So making all of this available improves customer satisfaction, as well as helps you resolve a lot of dispute and other related issues with the customer. Cash application, again, automating cash applications has tremendous efficiencies to be able to scan and OCR manual checks, for example, to automate, invoice and remittance matching. This is an area of, again, huge automation opportunity, credit debit matching, and in general, overall identification of the cash, to be able to match it and post it into the accounts. again, huge opportunity in terms of, how data-driven, automation, can help the cash application efficiency. So overall, across all the, 6 areas that we talked about in the order to cash cycle, starting from credit to the cash application, driving this process, with the digital and the data-driven way can improve your overall order to cash efficiencies. Again, from a business performance metrics perspective, the core metrics that you can immediately impact, and we have seen customers again, gain as significant as 25 to 30% improvement in their day sales outstanding within a few months of the deployment of data-driven order to cash systems. We have seen again, a huge improvements in free cash flows, huge improvement in reduction of bad debt write-offs, cost of operation, and a number of different ways. So it's a very obvious business case on the order to cash. Any improvements of order to cash, significantly improves the business performance of the companies. This is, an example of, one of our customers, is a large global chemical manufacturer, who deployed, again, a data-driven approach and an Emagia system to manage their order to cash process. One of the key issues that they were struggling, was unable to get the right cash forecast because their business was a very seasonal business, and a lot of trade promotions and other aspects, that impacted the forecasting of the cash. And by deploying an automated system, they were able to get again improvements in cash flow, as well as tremendous control on cash flow forecasting. Able to get a very accurate cash flow forecasting. And again, this is one such example of how a data-driven operations management on order to cash can impact the companies. So with this, again, the conclusion, or a summary of the order to cash, data-driven process is that many companies, again, can derive a lot of, cash flow, from their order to cash cycle. And there's a huge opportunity for companies to look at these processes and leverage some of these, new technologies that are out there, and see how they can, improve their, finance metrics. Again, John and I will be happy to share with you, any insights or, more customer studies. If you're, transformation project, for example, we'll be happy to provide you any further information that you may need on data-driven order to cash. So with this, I would like to turn this over for a few questions. Again, thank you for staying with us and, going through all of this information. And we're looking forward to, again, taking some questions from you.
Thank you, Gina. This is Monica again. So we do have one question that has come in. At what point should a company start to look at implementing a solution like this and utilizing predictive analytics? Is this better for small kind of startup companies, or mid-market companies, or larger organizations? What do you and John think about that?
That's a good question, Monica. And it's a good piece of, information that I probably should have mentioned at the beginning of my talk. Typically, as the volumes of the transactions grow, that's when the complexity happens. And again, data-driven approach can be used by small and large. At the same time, I think, what we're talking about here is efficiency for, mid to large companies, where they have, diverse operations and large volumes of invoices, typically in few thousands to few hundred thousands of transactions. And that's when, again, a complexity of managing, beyond Excel spreadsheet and, beyond ERP systems typically happen. And I'll hand this over to John. John, where do you see some of the improvements?
Yeah, so thank you, Veena. I think that, that there certainly is an ROI business case that needs to be looked at, but I think that generally what we've seen is companies certainly from $500 million to $2 to $3 billion, especially, are really kind of a prime target range. Because the infrastructure may not be there from a technology perspective, because historically some of the tools might not have scaled in that range. But I think that we're seeing increasing application, especially in those target zones, with just the quality of the cloud-enabled tools and being able to provide the level of analytical analysis and automation that can be brought into that space.
Excellent. And we have one more question that has come in. John, if you don't mind, we'll start with you on this one because it comes from your section of the presentation earlier. You mentioned that in some cases we may be going after clients who we think are the right ones to call when we're actually missing the ones we should be calling. How long will it take us to build the analytics that we need to be able to identify those clients who we really should be focusing our calling efforts on?
Well, actually, surprisingly a short amount of time, and I'll let Veena follow up on this, but being able to do that, just focusing on that narrow question and not getting into it very deep, but that's actually a more simpler equation than you would think. So I'm saying like a matter of weeks to be able to gather the data and to be able to provide that insight.
Absolutely, John. Again, companies can take two approaches. One, they can have their teams, build, solutions, from scratch and, try to get these kind of insights. They can also use packaged solutions like Emagia, where, all of the, data models as well as the dashboards are already pre-built. And within a matter of, few weeks, you should be able to, get insights, into your data. So again, you can choose a faster track with the packaged solutions.
Excellent. I think that's very helpful information for our audience. We have one final question, and Veena, if you don't mind to go ahead to go to the very last slide in the deck that has your contact information on it, as well as John. Our final question is, how do I learn more and how do I engage you to look at my own organization to find out if this is something